she tested here.
Yeah.
Tested the airport.
Yeah.
And they laid over at the airport and ran 4 hours. And then they took, some 1972 plane down to Jamaica.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the island. Tested again. Then she did it for 4 days.
I mean, even Hawaii.
Just for 4 days?
4 days.
Yeah, I mean, we were in Hawaii for 3 days. You have
That's
to,
right.
you gotta register.
All right, good evening. The hour of 5:30 PM, having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee. This meeting is being televised live on Channel 1302. The video is also posted on the city website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. If you are in the audience tonight, you may access the agenda from any mobile device. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets just as you enter the meeting room. To receive electronic copies of the future agenda packets, please go to the home webpage and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks will be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone who wishes has had a chance to speak. Once a motion has been made and seconded, only the committee members and public may speak. Councilors in attendance will have an opportunity at the next city council meeting. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room, identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. The written comments from the public will be accepted at the city clerk's office until Tuesday at 1 p.m. I will now call to order this regular meeting of Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee. Declare a quorum present. And as everyone knows, the required ordinance mask is no longer in effect in the city, but those who wish to wear a mask in support, an effort to reduce our health issues, you're more than welcome to do that. And with that, our regular agenda starts with a grant to the fire department.
Good evening. I'll be presenting a recommendation to accept a recently awarded grant. For background, the fire department applied for a Department of Justice grant in the amount of $84,425, and that was specifically geared towards offsetting overtime costs associated with extra fire department staffing due to the COVID-19 pandemic response. We're pleased to say that we received approval for that grant, and I'm requesting, or recommending, that the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee recommend to the full City Council the acceptance of the New Hampshire Department of Justice grant awarded to the fire department, totaling $84,425.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, and I have, yes, please.
Just a comment for the council. If you will remember, it was, I think, one of my manager's updates where we talked about the 10th person that was added to the shift and how we've extended that to the end of the fiscal year. And this grant, we are very happy that the fire department successfully got this grant, which will help to offset that cost.
And there are no other counselors present and no members of the public. Everybody's here to work hard at this agenda, so I won't have to ask that every time. If there is no further discussion, could I get a motion, please?
Move to recommend to the full City Council the acceptance of the New Hampshire Department of Justice grant awarded to the Keene Fire Department totaling $84,425, and to allow the city manager to do all things necessary for the acceptance and execution of the grant.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion by members of the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? No one opposed. Thank you. Passed unanimously. Thanks. The next item is Downtown Infrastructure Improvements and Reconstruction Project, the counselor selection process presented by the Public Works Department.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Court Blomquist, Public Works Director, Emergency Management Director.
Yep, this evening, we're continuing to move forward. The committee may remember back before the end of last calendar year, I come in and given the committee an update on the overall schedule for the downtown improvement and reconstruction project. That schedule had the city going out and looking for our consultant, starting in December with that selection process ending in February, early March. Pleased to let you know that we did issue our request for qualifications for firms to provide engineering and technical services for this particular project. As a reminder, this project is going to be looking at downtown, starting in the Central Square area, slightly to north and south and east and west there, moving down Main Street, down to about the Water Street area, also looking at Railroad Street and Gilboa Avenue. Of course, the main focus of the project is the replacement of the infrastructure, which ranges anywhere from about the early 1890s up till our new stuff from 1930s, which is our sewer system. We issued in December our request for qualifications. Firms had until February 3rd to submit their qualifications. The city received 2 proposals from firms. Stantec and Weston & Sampson were the 2 firms that did submit qualification packages. We had a review committee that had a number of folks on, including myself, representatives from community development, Mara Brenner, senior planner. We also had Duncan Watson, assistant public works director, Don Lucier, et cetera, on the committee. Since we only had 2 proposals, after reviewing the paper, the group recommended and we moved forward with interviews with both firms. It was very good, the interview process with both of them. Both of them were certainly qualified to do the work. We evaluated the firms based on their qualifications, number of projects or similar projects they've completed as a firm. We looked at their understanding approach to the project. This was not an RFP. We did not have a specific scope for them to propose on. We had the general outline of what kind of services we were looking for, and we asked them to sort of give us an idea of how they would approach the project. Experience of the project team, that's always important. We emphasize that certainly we appreciate senior level staffing in the various firms, but we were really interested in the folks who were going to do the day-to-day work. And finally, we had them talk to us about their resources, both in-house and within their firm, and also to their availability, certainly, to perform the work. After performing the interviews, the team unanimously supported moving forward, recommending Stantec Consulting Services as our preferred consultant. They had a number of things that sort of brought them to the top of the review. They have a team that has done a number of projects in downtowns in the state. One of their members is the former city engineer, Ed Roberger from Concord, who was involved in that. They had a number of other staff members who were going to be participating in it. They also talked about some unique approaches. One of the things we asked about was, when you're looking at our utilities, do we have to do digs? Can we do some no-dig options that could help in expediting the work, but also minimize disruption, as those things that we talked about? They talked about some different options that they could bring to us and for us to take a look at. And then, of course, one of the other areas that we were very interested in hearing about is communications, and they were very, very upfront about the need to have communications at all levels within the community and stakeholders, along with the greater community audience, because recognizing that this project is not just the downtown, it is influenced by the entire community. So we are recommending that you authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a professional services contract with Stantec. And if perchance we're unsuccessful, then to move to our second choice.
Questions from members of the committee? Can't let you get through this without a question. That name sounds familiar. Have they done work for us in the past, or?
Yes, they have.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was guess it's similar. I was going to ask what other cities they have worked with. If there's anything I'd recognize. Concord, it sounds like they were at least involved in, but
They've had folks involved with Concord, Cambridge, a number of other communities, both in New Hampshire, but also in New England. We were looking at again. promoting projects in other parts of the New England area.
Awesome, because they're gonna have such a strong impact on the look and feel potentially, so that's where I'm
Absolutely.
similar to the design and the branding stuff where we get to
Mhm.
have a feel on that, so, thank you.
Any other questions? Could I get a motion, please?
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute professional service contracts for engineering, technical, and construction services with Stantec Consulting Services Incorporated for the downtown infrastructure improvements and reconstruction project. Further, if the city cannot come to an agreement, the city manager is authorized to move to the second highest ranked proposer.
For a second?
Second,
Okay, been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions by our committee?
thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I think of as I hear the motion is that going all the way to execute, all the way for construction makes me a little bit nervous of like, this is, because we're not gonna see this again necessarily for like costing or any of that stuff to come back. This motion would put it all the way through construction without coming back. I
These
guess
would
that
be
just
for
makes me a little
construction
nervous.
services, not necessarily the construction project. Construction project would, once it's designed and bid, we would go through the bid process. So
Got
this
it.
is only for the engineering services. And yes, this would, I'm gonna do probably several contracts, but this will take us through and they will be part of the administration and oversight team as we start construction.
Yeah, I guess I'm misinterpreting what construction services were.
I'm sorry.
That's,
Yeah, that's typically your helping out with inspections, payments, communications, things like
Got it.
that.
Thank you.
All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is back to the CIP. Here for our final session of this group. And it looks like we start with the community development package. The first primary presentation is on page 30.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Rogers, the,
Finance director to get us moving.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jim. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and John. I just want to quickly, for the record, bring to your attention that Councilor Remy pointed out a Scribner's error in the CIP book on page 113. It reads in the paragraph that starts FY16, it mentions Wells Street Garage, and this is actually City Hall parking structure. So I just wanted to, for the record, bring that to everybody's attention. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Rogers, the acting Community Development Director. The Community Development Department has two items on the CIP this time. Both of them are updates. One of them is going to be an update to the comprehensive master plan, and then the second one is actually going to be an update to our GIS mapping program. And you'll note that, it, again, as the chair mentioned, it starts on page 30. I do have Mary Bruner, our senior planner, and Will Schaufman here with me tonight to give you a quick overview of both of these projects and certainly to answer any questions that the committee may have. And I'll turn that over to them.
I'm Mary Brenner, Senior Planner. For the master plan update, we have that scheduled for starting in fiscal year '24. It's actually a 2-year project, kind of separated into two phases, if you will. The first phase, again, is fiscal year '24. We have $50,000 allocated, and that will include a renewal of the community vision. I guess I should take a quick step back. This is to update the 2010 master plan. So we're not looking to comprehensively overhaul the whole thing and start from scratch. We already have a pretty strong document in place. So the goal here is to really update our existing document. And so the first phase will start with the renewal of the community vision. It will involve a lot of outreach and community engagement. We're going to do, some of the typical outreach and engagement that we would do with any planning project, but another component of this would be to do more neighborhood-focused engagement, along with those other activities that we normally do. It would also involve updating our socioeconomic and demographic info. We've built in doing a housing needs assessment, for example, and just updating the data so that we have current data and trends in the plan that we're looking at. Then the second phase would be for fiscal year '25, and there's 40,000 allocated, so a total of 90,000 for the whole project. This would include, continued outreach and engagement, the development of updated language for the plan, and the reorganization and graphic layout of the document. And then just also a note that we are looking to hire professional services to help out with this project. And I think that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we able to leverage any of the housing studies that have been done recently in part of that? I know there's been a lot of work done recently around what the units in the area are needed. I don't know if
Yeah, I think that's part of the plan, is to take a look at all of the data that's out there and what's been gathered. So I don't know that this will need to be, they certainly won't need to start from square one with that. But it's really taking a deeper dive into the housing trends in Keene and what we have available, what we think we'll need in the future. But yeah, certainly there's already a lot of data out there.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, good evening. Here to talk about the 10-year digital base map update. This project gets the city new aerial imagery and topography information, as well as ground features such as buildings and streetways, other items that are utilized regularly for not only asset management, but first responders that we have in vehicles, specifically at the fire department. There's also, it's scheduled for FY25. We're on a 10-year full revamp schedule. So the last collection was done in 2015. That was like a full collection project. The interim projects, which you're probably most remembering, would have been conducted in 2020, and that was just some new aerial imagery and a couple of specific features to help with a number of engineering projects, as well as the assessing revaluation program. So we're hopeful with the budget number that we have estimated for this project that we'll actually be able to expand collection to Babbage Reservoir in Roxbury, as well as the airport and wastewater facility in Swansea, to help with asset management efforts around more city facilities. So it's a one-year project. Collection happens as well as pre-planning the same year, and then the deliverables are usually made in fall after the imagery is taken in the spring.
I have a question that's indirectly related to the city manager. So the planimetrics data, like my understanding is that whole layering system can be used by different departments like the fire department and the police, and it can actually even track crimes. And then there's all these different layers. There's the layers that are available to the public, and then layers that are available strictly, confidentially to those who need it. Have we ever considered that? I mean, it sounds like it could be like a gold mine in terms of the information that we keep track of and all the different departments using it.
Yeah, so you can track all sorts of things in GIS. It depends on what you want to put into the system and the time and the effort to do so. So for instance, we track a lot of our water and sewer structures, and we add that as a layer into the GIS system. We could track, if we wanted to add it into the GIS system, crime activity, different types of crime activity. So there is a lot of potential for GIS, more so than we even use it for right now. However, it takes time and money to both add those things to the system and also then maintain the system. And we'll be talking about the future of GIS and what other things we might be able to look towards the future to be able to incorporate into the GIS program. But right now, Will's the best person to tell you all the different things that we have layers on.
Yeah. So the city's access website, which integrates those planimetric features that you mentioned, Councilor Chedbourne, also with the assessing data that we have for parcels on the assessing mapping website. That's like sort of the best depiction and of those planimetric features that you're mentioning. They also helped when we did the parcel remapping project get those parcel lines for the city more accurate. But as the city manager mentioned, stuff like crime and other things you might want to map would take some additional resources in order to sort of integrate and do some analysis with in terms of personnel and.
Yeah, I've just found it fascinating, and I actually learned it through the assessing office.
Yeah.
And those maps are incredibly helpful when you get down to the layers, and it shows you everything, like the watersheds,
Oh, absolutely.
fences. I mean, it's just very
Yeah, so
thorough.
many of those features are updated through this project that we're talking about right now.
And I heard like the fire department can use it. I mean, anyways, I know, I knew it immediately that meant money, but I wanted to bring it up because anyways, thanks.
Other questions from the committee? Not, I guess we're good.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
The next section is the airport. And begins on page 69.
Good evening, everyone. Dave Hickling, Airport Director. Before I get into specific projects, I'd like to talk a little bit about the funding we use to fund these projects. So we're fortunate enough as an airport to be part of the FAA National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. And as such, that makes us eligible for FAA AIP funding. It's Airport Improvement Project funding. So this program will fund 90% of eligible projects. Any project that the AIP program funds, the state will kick in 5%. So that leaves us obligated to 5% of that project. So what we do with the CIP that we present to you is we try to do all our projects under that program to maximize the funding there. In addition to that, we've been fortunate enough the last couple of years to be able to use airport generated revenue and some COVID-related funds to cover our 5%. So basically, these projects are done at no cost to the city. An example of that, so in the last 2 years, through the AIP program, we've received over $4.3 million for the taxiway projects and associated work with that. And I believe our cost for all of that was like under $2,000. It's very small. So you'll see through the CIP, we have a lot of projects that are spread out over many years. That's because we're trying to put that in there so we can maximize that AIP funding. One thing with the AIP money, though, is it's really at the discretion of the FAA as to what their priorities are, what they're going to fund when and how much they put towards it. So we can be aggressive applying for as much as we want, or as much as we want to apply for, but we kind of have to be flexible with our CIP to be able to adjust to what they decide to fund and how much they're going to fund it for. So you can kind of see that through the CIP. So jumping into the projects, the first project, and this is one that had been on the CIP for a while, and again, we were flexible, had to be flexible with the CIP and push it off a couple times to do other priorities. But we've got this coming up quick, and I think we're going to be successful getting that funded in the next couple of years. So the first portion of that project, just a little bit about this project. We have perimeter fence around a portion of the airport. It's basically the part that abuts to public areas. But there's a big area that has no fence around it that just kind of goes into a wetland, which allows wildlife to enter onto the runways and into the landing areas. Of course, this presents a danger. We've had some bad experiences in the past with an aircraft hitting a deer. Fortunately, no one was injured, but it did destroy the aircraft. Our staff is continuously going out there and chasing wildlife off. White-tailed deer are the biggest threat, but we have turkeys and coyotes and fox, all kinds of wildlife out there. So this project's goal is to put up a complete perimeter fence that would keep the wildlife out. It's pretty, you know, from a safety standpoint, very critical to do. So this would start FY '23, which we look at about $270,000. This would include the permitting, environmental work that needs to be done, and the design of the project. And then in FY '24, we would really push to get funding for the entire project, which would be a little over $1 million that would complete the construction of this fence. There's some environmental work we'll need to do. We'll look at putting that fence to try to include the smallest space as possible inside the fence, which it would impact some wetlands, so we'd have to work through that process. So the next project is also a priority. I think all the projects are priorities. So the next one is obstruction management, and this is really something all airports deal with unless they're on top of a mountain or in some barren wasteland. All airports are dealing with the growth of vegetation and how to mitigate that. So this would be a multi-year project. It would start off with actually doing another obstruction survey to find out where we really need to address our attention to. It would move on to, this would also include environmental permitting and design, and we'd also do some easement acquisition to get permission to remove some of these obstructions. Then we'd finally do the obstruction. So it'd be a multi-year to get to the point where we do it, but we have to get that started. So that would start FY '25 through '27. We've got a minimal amount programmed for that period based on what we think we could get for FAA funding. Towards the end, in FY '28 and '29, we believe we'd have justification to get more funding. At that point, we're actually doing the design and the removal. Next project is pavement maintenance. This is an ongoing program. As I said, the AIP program pays for most of the infrastructure at the airport, including all the pavement. Part of the agreement of getting the funding to do that is we need to maintain that pavement. So this would involve crack sealing and other pavement maintenance, but a big part of this is also the marking. We've got like over 75,000 square feet of painted pavement out there. There's a lot of paint that goes down, and that's pretty costly to replace that and paint those markings every couple of years. So again, that's multi-use, and it'd be based on available funding at that time. Snow removal equipment is also fundable through the AIP program. We have a vehicle that's a 1995, about 25 years old, a six-wheel dump truck with a big sweepster on the front, which is up for replacement. So we put that in the CIP with anticipating getting grant funding for that. So this project has been pushed down a little bit too. This would be a pretty expensive extensive project, expensive and extensive. This would be expanding our main apron right out in front of the terminal. We have times now when we get a couple corporate jets parked in there and it pretty much takes up most of that apron, and it gets pretty tight in there for planes to be maneuvering and taxiing around. We've run into situations where we have to close taxiways to use them for parking when we have a couple big aircraft in there. So it would be about time to replace that pavement anyways, and at the same time we'd look at expanding that apron and making it bigger. And that is in the airport CIP as well. One thing I'd like to add to that project that wasn't in the CIP or in the airport master plan is to add the ability to do de-icing. So we'd put in a collection system, so if we're de-icing aircraft, it would collect the glycol, and we could treat that glycol. And then the last project is beacon replacement. So we've got 12 hazard beacons in the area on different hills and towers just to mark obstructions for aircraft. And this project would allow for replacing those beacons. And we hope at the time we could do that with solar power and LED lights, which would be environmentally or save on power. So that kind of sums up our CIP. Are there any questions?
Questions from members of the committee? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one actually on the fencing.
Mhm.
I hear Mr. Hooper in the back of my head talking about the availability of like photographing for birds. And we're not going to impact
it's-
that with our?
I have been bringing this up to the New Hampshire DOT and the FAA, and our engineer is aware of it. I really want to move that fence away from that road towards the runway, and that's why we actually have more environmental impact, is because doing that, we're going to have to impact more of the wetlands. But really, it's only impact when we're putting it in. Once it's in, it's not really going to be an impact to the wetlands. So we can mitigate that by using timber mats or doing it in the winter or whatever. So that will completely alleviate that problem along the road, because I want to move the fence farther away from that. So two benefits: one, for the people that use that area for recreation. Number two, I just didn't think it made much sense to enclose all the wildlife habitat inside the fence that you're trying to keep them from. So I want to keep that outside the fence if we can. It
Thank-
seems to be well received by the DOT and the FAA.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, members of the committee. Duncan Watson, Assistant Public Works Director, and with me is Jim Mountford, the Fleet Services Operations Manager. I'm going to let Jim take the fleet portion of this before we move on to solid waste. So,
Good evening, councilors, manager, directors. We're here to present the CIP for the Fleet Fund. As some of you know, the fleet actually has 157 vehicles in the fleet that fleet takes care of. There's an additional 99 pieces of equipment and other vehicles that the fleet actually works on. For the city of Keene, some of the fire equipment, some of the airport stuff that's not owned by the fleet. Fleet also takes care of all the rental rates for those 157 vehicles, which were, those are comprised of the repairs, the amount of hours it goes into them, the amount of fuel it goes into, and other costs as insurance and replacement value. The Fleet Division works on every piece of equipment for the city of Keene. If it's owned by the city, the Fleet Division works on it. Rarely is anything outsourced that is owned by the city. It's usually all handled internally by us. We also have a fuel island that we maintain and take care of. All that fuel is bought by the Fleet Division, sold out to the other divisions, which is part of the rental rates as is too. If you're looking at the replacement schedule, you'll notice that all the vehicles that are up for replacement, those vehicles have all timed out as far as the amount of years that we hold on to them. These vehicles are looked at every time that they are up for replacement. We actually look at these vehicles mechanically. We look at them for body, to see if the bodies are starting to rust. If there's a means to extend the use of these vehicles, we'll actually do that. We've done that successfully with some older police vehicles. Those vehicles were pushed off to other divisions that use them for far less miles than they would have been in the police division. And those cars are also still under warranty when they get circulated out of the division of police. Some of those cars get turned into detail cars. The officers will use those for traffic duty and whatever else that they have to do, as far as their job pertains. When we buy vehicles for the fleet, everything is done under Sourcewell. Sometimes we're lucky enough to buy vehicles under a demo status or even a used piece of equipment, which we've successfully done for many years. We've had the ability to buy the excavator for the water department, for instance. We bought several years ago, but we bought that machine used and saved $50,000 off the price of what it would have costed new. We've done that with the planer and some other items, and it's been a pretty successful program. The staff at Fleet will evaluate any and all the equipment either coming in or going out of the Fleet Division. We're also looking at, down in the future for next year, we're proposing to have a comprehensive evaluation done of the building. As time moves on into the future, and as will be, the city at some point in time, who knows, maybe the near future, could be tomorrow, could be next year or down the road. We'll be looking at electrification vehicles, electric cars, more into the hybrid market. For whatever will fit the city's needs, we'll look into that and evaluate how that works into into the scope of what we're gonna need for vehicles for the city. Infrastructure has a lot to do with that, you know, where we can put charging units, who can benefit the most from this, how long we're gonna keep the vehicle, warranty, and actually, the utmost is how well the vehicle's gonna be used for each division. There's some divisions, hypothetically, if we bought an electric car tomorrow, they may not get the total life out of that vehicle because there isn't enough use from the department, but they will need, you know, they still need a vehicle to do their jobs. So we want to make sure that everything that we're doing is going to be efficient as far as not just money-wise, but as far as, you know, effectively for those divisions to use the vehicle. Most of the time, people are hauling around items, they're driving in the snow, you know, so we got to get to a point where that when these electric vehicles are available to us, we'll evaluate those to make sure that they will work, you know, specifically for what we're going to need them for. We don't want to get something just to stick it somewhere and it not be very useful. You know, unfortunately, that happens with some fleets, but we're hoping to stay away from that as the future comes around. The other thing that we're going to be working on down the road is we're going to be hopefully installing a new roof here next year. We've been putting Band-Aids on that roof for a number of years now. It's been holding up, so that's coming up here next year, I believe. And then a few years down, we will be proposing to have money spent so that we can put a fire alarm panel and a suppression system in the building. That'll be, you know, an interesting to see how that comes down. Since we're tough on space down there. Hopefully we can put it on the roof.
So the projects that Jim just mentioned begin on page 192. Page 192 is the equipment replacement program itself, which is the source of funding for our regular replacement program. As Jim explained, we replace vehicles not based on some artificial schedule, but when the vehicle actually needs to be replaced. So as we're able to extend the life of a vehicle, we'll extend the replacement out for future years. And on page 193 is the project that Jim just referenced, the roof replacement. That's actually going to be monies available for us in July, providing the CIP passes. And we've got a very patchwork quilt-looking roof right now where we're always chasing leaks. And this will be providing a new membrane roof for that main part of the building to stop the roof leaking and preserve the building life. The consultant that Jim mentioned would be a project that's described on page 194. We would be looking to develop a scope of services, which is actually something that Jim and I are meeting on currently, to hire a consultant to evaluate our fleet facility, to determine what future needs we may have as we start transitioning from fossil fueled vehicles to the eventual either hybrid and or electric vehicles down in the future. It's an inevitability, and we want to be prepared for it, and this is the first step in that process. If you look at page 195, some of the results that come out of the consultant study will start to appear in this budget. It's more of a placeholder because we don't actually know exactly what changes are going to be proposed to service these types of vehicles. And so this is basically a nod out into the future to say that we're going to be requiring some upgrades to the fleet facility to be able to service the new vehicles that we'll be acquiring down the road. And that's where we'll be having obviously many more discussions about this down the road as this project nears. And then lastly, Jim mentioned on page 196, the fire suppression system. This is it's basically a recommendation from our insurer, Primex, which was we don't have an adequate fire suppression system. In fact, we don't have any fire suppression system in the building right now. And because of the nature of the type of business that we do in the fleet building, fire suppression system is recommended in the event, and hopefully we never have to use it, but it's certainly something that we should have on site in the event that a fire breaks out. Those are the projects for the fleet fund or equipment fund, and we're more than happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Of the 157 existing vehicles, are any of them fuel efficient, or do you have any? I know
Yeah, we still have a couple of hybrid Ford Escapes. Engineering uses those now, and actually there's one here at City Hall that's used by the Planning and Inspections Division. And we also have the electric gem car that Fleet uses every day. We've put 40,000 miles on that going from the Fleet to the PD. So instead of driving a fossil fuel vehicle, and we've had that vehicle since 2009. So we, you know, every 3 to 4 years, we put new batteries in it, and we're still running it, you know, since then, every day. So it's worked out fine. You know, that vehicle was, if I recall this correctly, it was bought for the parking division back in '09. And it didn't work out for their uses as expected. They had it wouldn't haul the amount of weight that wasn't anticipated by collecting change and things like that. So that vehicle's been used by a couple of different divisions over the years. So, and then we ultimately ended up with it. And as I said, we use it every day. Probably 3 or 4 trips across the, you know, all the way from our building to the PD is it's a long haul if you're walking it 4 or 5 times a day to pick up cars, or going to the Public Works building to pick up, you know, we have a storage facility over there above their parking garage. A lot of materials that we keep for the PD and for the Public Works division and other divisions, lights, seating, brackets, to that stuff, we use that little vehicle to haul it constantly. So, and as I'd said earlier, we're always looking to figure out what divisions will benefit from a electric vehicle or even a hybrid vehicle. Some of it is cost, and especially, I mean, most everybody knows these days, availability. I have to replace a van in the fleet for this current budget, and I can't get a van at all this calendar year. So, you know, it's starting to be a little bit tougher on how and when we're gonna be able to get some of these vehicles. I had currently looked into the hybrid police vehicles, which is, they're a few more, they're more money, definitely, almost $6,000 more than what we're paying for our vehicles. The problem was that there wasn't enough available for us to get our hands on one, even if we wanted to, with the current situation as far as what's out there for, you know, what's available to us these days. A couple of our trucks we won't even see until after the budget, the new budget gets approved. You know, we ordered those trucks back in, actually right after July 1st. The new VACCON that we need, the combination truck for the Public Works division. We'll be lucky if we see that vehicle by July, and that's happening with a bunch of other stuff too this year.
Thank you. So I know you guys mentioned you're interested in looking at more ways to get more cleaner, greener vehicles such as electrics and hybrids. And I'm just wondering if you're going to be taking that into account when the new fire suppression system is designed, because I know a number of those vehicles have unique firefighting needs due to the rare metals used.
And that's part of with the building evaluation too. We have to have an explosion-proof bay if we're going to work on fully electric vehicles, and it also comes with a whole pile of training and special equipment to work on these vehicles. You know, a lot of those vehicles are 72 volts. We're most common working with 12 and 24 volts. So there'll be some new training. I mean, just like it has been with the combustion engine over the years, we'll get that way also with the electric vehicles.
The short answer is also that the proposed system will be a non-water-based system.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
couldn't use a water-based system, even the current state that we're in now, because of the chemicals that we use in the facility.
Yep. Thank you.
I'm not,
It's, my question's nonsense. I just want to know what that thing is.
we'll show up tomorrow morning, you're gonna see it working. Okay. Jim, you wanna explain to him your first vehicle?
What is the photo on 192?
Hold on a second. Get there, sorry.
You might let you drive it.
192. 192 is a trackless. That's one of the sidewalk equipment. And the way you see it in that form, it's actually set up for summer use for running the flail mower. You can't see the mower on the front of it because it's on the front of the machine. And those dual wheels keep it so it floats when it's off into the grass and into the soft terrain. In the wintertime, those outside wheels come off. Flail mower comes off the front, and a plow goes on, and a spreader goes on the back for salt or sand, and the weight box comes off.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Come down anytime you want, we'll give you a tour.
And one thing you should know, that the proportions are slightly off because we kind of elongated it to fit the box. So it's a little off scale.
Yeah, it looks a little stranger than it really does in person.
Okay, all right, that explains a little bit more too.
Look out your window tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is this the first year that the suppression system is shown in the projects?
Yes.
Yes.
I guess that concerns me that we haven't, in the long term of the thought process, we didn't think about that. We got, any day or night, we could have a couple $1 million worth of equipment in there. And we don't have the best protection, but I'm sure we're looking at our projects in a different way.
I mean,
these
one
days,
of the things that we've taken care of over the years, I mean, obviously, we have fire extinguishers like every 10 feet apart inside of the building. Fire department also has a Knox box set up to get into our building right off the bat, so they don't need any of us to be there. So if there was for instance, they have the ability to get in there, and a lot of the said management has the ability to get into our building too.
Okay. Thank you. Who's next? All you?
Me again.
Your father's coming up to help you out.
I'm just gonna, we never like being alone in public work, so we'll just go cover most of it.
Just as a reminder for those who might not know, the Solid Waste Division, also known as the Solid Waste Fund, operates independent of the tax rate. The Solid Waste Fund is funded entirely by tipping fees at the transfer station, as well as the sale of recycling commodities that are sold from our recycling operations. We currently process around 21,000 tons from the City of Keene residents and commercial businesses. And we also have a contract, we're in the first year of a renewal contract with Waste Management, which has them supplying us with currently around 12,000 tons from outside of Keene. And the combination of that allows us to continue this very successful and unique business model that we've achieved during the entirety of my career, which is unique in the sense that no tax dollars fund the solid waste operation. And Keene is the only municipality in the state of New Hampshire that operates completely independently from the tax rate. And it's something to be very proud of, and it's something that we're proud that we're able to continue that using this model. And for the next 3 years, it looks like our business model will continue to be successful. But as we begin to see, we've talked about this many years, where there's sort of impending storm coming, which is what we refer to as a disposal crisis. And the simple fact of the matter is that there's a line in the not too distant future that's going to be crossed where the disposal capacity in the state of New Hampshire is not adequate to take care of New Hampshire's disposal needs. Now, obviously, Keene, isn't an island unto itself, and we're at the mercy of the marketplace. Right now, there is disposal capacity, but the problem with New Hampshire's disposal capacity is that there are no restrictions on out-of-state waste coming to the state of New Hampshire to be disposed. You may be aware that the state of Massachusetts had basically closed every landfill in the state of Massachusetts, and a tremendous amount of that tonnage is making its way into New Hampshire and taking up airspace that could, in theory, be used for for New Hampshire residents, but there's a variety of reasons why that's not being done, and there's talk at the state level about what to do about that. But right now, other than some permitting that's ongoing, there's the primary landfill and that we use right now through our contract is in Rochester, New Hampshire, the turnkey landfill, and they have capacity in that landfill currently until the year 2034. There's also another major landfill up in Bethlehem, New Hampshire, that is currently in the expansion process for about 5 years. But within that next 5 years, the line is going to be crossed. And right now, we have a 3-year contract with Waste Management for the disposal of our material from our transfer station. And we're in constant discussion internally about how do we address that down the road. And it is, I will be determined to, as we get closer to this contract expiration, our next request for proposals will be looking to secure our ability to maintain this business model as much as possible down the road. But with the increasing cost of disposal, and a lot of that has to do with the cost of shipping the waste, long distances, that's going to be increasingly tricky. But we do have flow control in the city of Keene, which really helps our business model. And we have the ability to control the rates of the tipping fees at the transfer station. But, there's probably, somewhat of an upper limit to that. And I am hopeful that some new technology may come, in the relatively near horizon that allows us to have other options than just simply taking 70% of our waste stream and shipping it across 125 miles to be buried in a landfill, that we look to divert far more than we could have ever imagined that we could divert from our current practices. So that's just setting the table for down the road. Specific to the projects, on page 125, this is the equipment replacement program. We do have a project that is in fact coming due. We've often referred to this page as a placeholder because we service all of our equipment on a regular basis. We work closely with our service contractors, and they reasonably give us a heads up as to, okay, there's metal fatigue here, there's cracking, there's issues with this. And so you need to start planning for, the replacement of this. But, and then what's coming up in 2023 is our in-feed conveyor, which basically feeds the recycling up the conveyor line and drops it onto our processing line. And then the processing line itself, the belts are wearing out. So we're going to need to replace the in-feed conveyor this coming fiscal year. And then down the road, there will be a need to replace both the cross belt magnet. It's a magnet that sits across the line, and any ferrous metal that comes down the line, it automatically picks it up. It saves us from having a human to do that, and propels it off the line and makes our work easier. And then the other piece that will need to be replaced someday, and there's placeholders for this basically, anticipating when it might be replaced, is called an eddy current separator, which is a rare earth magnet. And it basically what it does, somewhat miraculously, and if you ever want to come up and see it in action, it's a source of endless fascination, but it's the rare earth magnet basically magnetizes non-ferrous metal. So it makes an aluminum can magnetic, and through its rare earth magnet, it repels the aluminum can off of the processing line over the trash bin that's basically right off the end of the line, and allows us to capture these valuable aluminum cans without the need of human sorting. So it's been when I first started in the city of Keene, working up at the recycling center, I spent, that was my station, the aluminum cans, and I used to sit there and throw the cans off the line, thinking to myself, I have a master's degree. And so it's a big improvement over what we had there. So that's the equipment replacement program. The page 126 is our weight scale. Basically, part of the heart and soul of what we do up there is we measure everything, both inbound and outbound, and the weight scale is critical to that. I would consider the project that's listed here in fiscal year 25 to be a placeholder. We inspect our scale. We've done some work on our scale over the past years to preserve the life. We continually look at the deck to see that the deck is in good shape, but more importantly, the load cell is the guts of what a weight scale is. And so far, with our continued maintenance, the load cell seems to be in good shape, weighing accurately. We have our scales are certified by the Bureau of Weights and Measures, and if there's ever any problems, we may be, if there's ever a problem with the weight scale, we're not certified any longer. We would have to bring in a temporary scale system while we replace the main load cell, but that's not anticipated until at least 2025, and hopefully maybe even be able to push that project out further years. Page 127 is a refurbishment of the facility interior. The building was completed in 1994, and everything that's there is effectively original to that building. And so there's been a tremendous amount of wear and tear on the common spaces, the break room, some offices for the transfer station specifically, locker room, restrooms and whatnot. So we have begun the process to engage an architect to provide us with a rough design, and using that design, we will be looking for a contractor come after July to do some interior refurbishment of that facility to bring it more up to date. And it's definitely a little tired now, so it's a project that's overdue and necessary. Page 128 is about our pavement replacement program. The main areas of the recycling center, as you come in on the access road and go around the scale and around the building and drop off your recycling and then either go through the transfer station out that way, that pavement is also original to 1994. We've done lots of pothole patching over the years and other refurbishing processes, but it's never, the pavement has never had a full service refurbishment. So what we're proposing is a mill shim overlay, standard to a road rehab project. And we would be doing that up at the recycling center, anticipated in the year 2025. And then finally, on page 129, if any of you have been up to the recycling center, once you leave the pavement to go to the upper level where you're dropping off your household trash, or you're going to do composting, or to the household hazardous waste building, or scrap metal, or all those things that are in the upper level, that whole area is gravel. And that has been a challenging thing to maintain with the number of vehicles that travel up and down those roads, both heavy vehicles and passenger vehicles. We receive somewhere in the neighborhoods of 18,000 vehicles a year up at the recycling center, and the vast majority of them end up at the upper level one way or the other. And this would be proposing to pave those surfaces to make the road maintenance a lot easier, because we spend an awful lot of time doing the road maintenance right now.
Questions, members of the committee? Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment really on the pavement project for the upper level. I go up every couple of weeks, and the gravel's well maintained in general, but it can certainly get rough at times. One thing that does, though, is it does keep people at a pretty low speed going around that first blind turn. So not really a question, more of a comment, just to want to make sure we consider any safety precautions that we might be able to implement right there, so that people aren't whipping around and we don't run into any accidents on that corner.
Noted.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Mr. Chairman, there was a reason I just wanted to step up for a few moments. I first want to extend my appreciation to the committee. You have reviewed lots of information, starting back at our CIP presentations back in January, and then also participating through the various sections here of the Public Works area. There's a lot here to digest. There is a lot of things that the council and the community own and are responsible for. And the CIP does represent the level of efforts through long-term programming to be able to do this. I would also like to certainly thank the city manager. She's part of the puzzle building that we work on with her to make sure it all fits. And of course, the last folks that I have to say thank you to is, of course, the finance department through Mary. And without them trying to fit this puzzle together and put these projects would not be possible. But again, I thank you for your attention to my folks' work. They, even though they may not always seem that way, they are all very pleased to present it to you, because this is one of the few times throughout the year we have an opportunity to talk to you sort of on a bigger picture on what we're doing and where we're recommending that we go. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
All right, thank you. Thank everybody who's contributed over the course of the last 3 nights that we did this portion of the program. So I have a reminder to the other members of the city council that they want to take a good look at this book over the course of the next several weeks. Next week, or March 3rd, a public hearing, so members of the public who want to make comments about all the good work that's been done here, they could do that at the city council meeting on that evening, and those comments will be taken into consideration by this committee and then ultimately by the entire city council. So our next time as the finance committee to deal with any portions of this will be after the public hearing, and we'll kind of do a line, not a line by line review, but we'll just be prepared to discuss any comments or any suggestions we might want to make to it before it gets approved by the city council. And for those who don't know how the program works, once this is adopted as the plan, doesn't necessarily make sure that it's going to happen, because it'll all be evaluated based upon what funding is available. I sure hope that we're able to fund this, and we probably would like to fund a lot more than what's slotted for each particular year because we have so much to do. But it will be evaluated, and the whole city council will make a judgment as to whether or not they're ready and willing to put the first year in the budget that's passed by the end of June. So, thank you very much. We're adjourned.
Thank you.